it's one thing to understand the world. The other thing, of course, is to change it. What would each of you advocate as or suggest that what 380 people on this call might think about doing to stop the killing and to prevent a wider war? And maybe Irene has her hand up. Thank you.
Well, I think the first thing I would ask is for the U.S. To make totally public the amount of arms, economic and military aid it provides Israel, and to consider halting military aid to Israel at the present time.
Well,
Asaf?
yeah. Okay. I'm going to try to be a bit optimistic here. I'm all for what Irene just proposed, but I think that what is going on right now in the United States in particular, I know it's not happening in Washington. It's not happening among the political class, but at a lower grassroots level, there's a lot of things going on. And I've been long enough in this country to see, for example, that the people who are at the forefront of building up pressure from below are groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, or If Not Now. And this gives me a lot of good feelings about what could happen. And I'm not saying it's going to change the policy of the United States overnight, but this is the kind of pressure that has to be built up. It is building. I mean, this is happening all across the country. I happen to be, like all of us here, the panelists are academics. We know that at the level of the administration, there are all kinds of pressures that they cannot speak the way they should. And they're doing all kinds of things that are very deplorable, the way they've been pushing out some university presidents. But I also see, because I see talking to students or people who are at a lower level, there is a lot of feelings for doing something that could put pressure maybe on their representatives, on the senators. And that is part of a movement to build up pressure in this country to push the people who make the decision in Washington to move in a different direction. I think, for example, Mr. Biden is in a bind right now. They say that some of the groups in the United States that put him in, that voted for him, I'm talking, for example, about the Arab American, there is a large group of them in the state of Michigan. They're so disgusted with the policies followed by Mr. Biden and Blinken. They're not going to vote for him. Okay. I mean, it also poses the other issue. I mean, if Biden is not elected, then we have Mr. Trump, who is worse. But nevertheless, there is something here that things are shifting. There's a dynamic that could be developed further. I don't know. Okay, yes, the election is coming soon, and that could be something to plan more carefully but there is a movement going on right now. I feel at the lower level, at the grassroots level, it's going the right way.
Well, I think very much along what Irene and Asaf have been saying. As far as specific measures are concerned, I think in addition to making more transparent the degree to which the U.S. has supplied weaponry from U.S. taxpayer money would be an important supplement to the kind of rethinking of the relationship to Israel that is so important to take place. I would think that also proposing an arms embargo in the General Assembly and perhaps in the Security Council would have considerable symbolic and possibly substantive value. And the third specific thing to give, I think would be timely, would be a people's tribunal dedicated to people's tribunal of persons of conscience dedicated to clarifying and documenting what has happened since October 7th. and providing an opportunity for the peoples of the world to speak, including pointing to the failures of the intergovernmental system to take any kind of effective protective action. And where I very strongly agree with Asaf is the best hope of the Palestinians is the mobilization of civil society at this stage. And the South African initiative is important because if this court gives a positive result to South Africa, it will escalate the popular participation through global solidarity, activism and pressure for boycotts in sports, culture, and other domains. That proved very successful in the struggle against South African apartheid. And Israel is becoming a pariah state that has made itself, through its behavior, through the outrageously open acknowledgement of genocidal intent, a pariah country or a rogue state. And this is a moment where civil society can produce a new balance of forces in the world. And if one looks at all the colonial wars, they were won by the weaker side militarily. And that's an important lesson for the 21st century, that it isn't weapons that control political outcomes. The US should have learned that in Vietnam, where it won every battle, had total superiority in land, air, and sea, and yet lost the war. And it couldn't learn. See, part of the problem is it's unable to learn those kinds of lessons because of the strength of the military-industrial complex, the arms industry, the global geopolitical role being played by the US, all the military bases. So one's in a kind of dilemma where we know what we should be doing, but there's no way to get it done.
You say that public opinion in the Arab world is strongly in support of the Gazan people and angry at the U.S. Arab elites remain tied to the U.S. To what degree will that public opinion actually have any political impact on those countries?
Good question. Right now, what we have seen is large mobilization, say in Jordan, and also large mobilization in other, like in Tunisia, in North Africa, but not to the point where the governments are taking an open public stand in support of doing something. For example, why can't some of these countries make a public support the South African suit against Israel? Jordan has done that, but what we read also, that this is something that I was reading earlier today, this has happened in part because of public pressure in Jordan. Now, something that happened about 2-3 hours ago, I don't know if this is correct, but I heard someone send a message. I received a message saying that Saudi Arabia decided to support the South African suit. This is interesting because only yesterday, MBS, the ruler of Saudi Arabia, the Prince Mohammed, was meeting with Blinken and saying things that we're all in harmony. We agreed together. And Blinken made a statement saying that the suit, the South African suit has no merits. And they made their statement to the press. And then today, if this is correct, I received this message a couple of hours ago, is that Saudi Arabia decided to support the South African initiative. One can take this in different ways. I mean, one can say, okay, it's MBS and Saudi Arabia trying to say, we are not following directives from the United States. We do things independently. Okay. I mean, there are limits to that. Or it could be that within the ruling circle in Saudi Arabia, some people, and there are some indications to that, are not too happy with the way MBS is pushing the whole game. And I would like to assert some distance from that. But in answer specifically, is there something that is going to, I mean, is there going to be pressure to the point where the king of Jordan is going to do something more dramatic? I don't see it yet. I don't know. I just mentioned earlier that none of the Abraham Accord countries have broken with Israel. They're still there. There are 4 countries, Saudi Arabia, no, not Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and then at the distance, there's Morocco and Sudan. And Morocco and Sudan got in because of some bartering with the United States. Sudan was told that if you join, then we're going to remove you from the list of states sponsoring terrorism. And so they joined. And then Morocco was told, okay, you join, and then the United States recognized the sovereignty of Morocco over the Western Sahara. This is something they wanted for a long time. So there was kind of back and forth exchanges, but the 2 countries that were very eager to be part of the Abraham Accord, Bahrain and United Arab Emirates, have not done anything official that will break a relation with Israel. More than that, I could say, Bahrain, even though it was not, I didn't see it in the U.S. press. Bahrain is part of the group of countries that are trying to do something about the Red Sea situation. I mean, you followed that some of the ships that are going through the Red Sea are being bombarded or something by the Houthis in Yemen. And okay, the UK, United States, and different countries are joining to try to do something about that. One Arab country has joined in this effort, not United Arab Emirates. Bahrain had joined. But it's a small place where they don't have an army. I mean, it's nominal. Well, so nothing so far, but probably if this continues, something more dramatic can happen.
Thank you, Asaf. A lot of questions here. Try to sort my way through them. Since we've been talking about the International Court of Justice, there's a question from Jeffrey Weiss. Any prediction on how the 15 judges at the World Court will vote later this week on a cease and desist order? Maybe this should go to Dick, given his academic specialty here.
Well, it's very hazardous to predict judges in a case that's so politically salient. We don't know which judges are susceptible to pressures from their governments and how independent these judges feel in a case that some governments are very dedicated to having decided one way or the other. And incidentally, there's 17 judges because each party, Israel and South Africa, can appoint an ad hoc judge, which they've done. So I think on the basis of the evidence and juristic integrity, there should be a 17-0 vote. So it's a matter of how much the politics and the primacy of geopolitics distorts that juridical analysis. And I'm not able to see much in the crystal ball that would give me a number that would be satisfying. I certainly am hopeful that it will be a substantial majority that will support the initiative.
Thank you, Dick. So a question from George Smith. If, inshallah, the U.S. decided to use the full power of its leverage to bring about an immediate, unconditional ceasefire in Gaza, could it succeed? Who wants to take this on?
Repeat, what is the question?
The question is if the U.S. Decided to use its full power, the full power of its leverage, to bring it about an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza, could it succeed? Does the United States have that degree of power and influence? Irene, maybe to you?
Well, the question really is, I mean, there are many questions in this question. One is, why the hesitation to demand a ceasefire? The answer is that the Israelis have not wanted a ceasefire, since the absence of such gives them an advantage that they can continue as they have been doing. Will the U.S. then break its intimate accord with Israel, informal and formal with Israel, and say, no, we demand a ceasefire at the present time? I don't know. Maybe the answer in part has to do with the kind of external pressure that the U.S. is facing, the kind of pressure that Asaf mentioned and that Richard mentioned now, that the U.S. is facing in the current situation. Maybe they will take that step. If they do, I think that it will be a significant break or significant shift or significant reassessment in U.S.-Israeli relations, which would be to the good. I strongly hope for that. I think that insisting on holding back on a ceasefire is shameful from a humanitarian point of view, and really exposes the U.S. The kinds of interests that move the U.S. policy.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment?
Well, I think the way George asked that question, I have no disagreements with Irene on that, but the way George asked that question is that it's a hypothetical question. What if the United States, by some magic, is going to say, stop? Then what? What will Israel do? Well, the reality, well, leaving aside whether the United States is going to do that, but if the US were to say, stop, my view is that Israel will have to stop. Israel cannot continue on its own. They're using, I mean, its economy, its army, everything is totally integrated into the United States. And there are cases in the past where, for example, I don't have the exact date, where they were trying to send maybe something, Joe, remember, send some technology to China. And the United States said, don't do that, stop. You can't do it. And they stopped. There are other cases in the high tech, things that they wanted to do on their own. And the United States stepped in and said, you cannot do that, and they had to stop. So my view is this, is that it's very hypothetical, but if ever the United States come to the point and say, you stop, don't do it, Israel will have to follow suit. It will create a total upheaval in Israel itself. Sure, okay, so there'll be some kind of a internal revolution or something. And it could be also here in the United States, some upheaval within the ruling classes. But, and this is all hypothetical. I mean, if the United States come to the point, if the ruling class in the United States come to the point of saying, stop, Israel would have to stop.
Thank you, Asaf. And among other things, I think the question points to the question ultimately of moral and political responsibility, hypothetical or otherwise. So a question from our friend Carolyn Eisenberg. Rusty, can any of the speakers comment on political attitudes of our NATO allies on the conflict? Is there any willingness among those governments to adopt a more critical attitude toward Israel?
Well, all of our allies have been more critical than the US. So really the issue is not so much the relationship between our allies and Israel, but our allies and the US government. And there I think that there's a broader question. To what extent does the situation in Gaza really impede, in any way affect that broader set of relationships? I think that's very, very important. If the price of the war, supporting the war in Gaza, is not high enough such that the European states feel moved to openly criticize the US, then we're in difficulty. But I think that's shifting for reasons that Asaf implied, and that is public opinion, global public opinion, demonstrations globally against the continuation of war.
Question here is concerned about the constant reference to Iran as supporting terrorism throughout the region. Richard, could you shed some light on the degree to which, maybe Asaf as well, in which Iran is involved in supporting terrorism or not?
Yes, I can try. Of course, there is a huge propaganda effort to tie Iran to everything that has happened that has produced this crisis, starting with the October 7th Hamas attack. You notice even in the mainstream print media like the New York Times, they always refer to Iran-backed Houthis or Iran-backed Hezbollah or Iran itself, a proxy of Iran. And this is trying to create a consciousness that Iran is our major enemy in the region. And at the same time, suppressing the idea that if Iran is backing countries, what the US is doing is multiple times what Iran seems to have been doing. So I think Iran has certainly sympathies with the Palestinian struggle. Those sympathies extend to its political self-interest in not being attacked. It is lots of problems within its own society, but I think it's dangerous state propaganda that is building up this notion that Iran is the real enemy standing behind this kind of anti-Israeli quote unquote terrorism or criminality, as was evidenced by the October 7th attack. So I really think it's important to try to understand as accurately as possible the limited degree to which Iran is involved in the direct shaping of the conflict.
If I may, Joe, add a footnote to this, is that if in that survey of public opinion, only 4% of the 8,000 respondents in 16 Arab countries say that Hamas did whatever it did, 4% think that it was in pursuit of a foreign agenda, such as Iran. So 4% are, So, and then only 5% think that that was something in relation to Arab normalization with Israel. Okay, so the view in Arab countries is that whatever happened since October 7 is totally separate from Iran. But of course, I mean, whatever Dick said is, yes, I mean, they know Iran has a policy that is generally supportive, but there's this kind of a propaganda in this country. Whenever they mention Hezbollah, they say it's supported by Iran. Whenever they mention the Houthis, they're supported by Iran. Whenever they mention Hamas, it's supported by Iran. But it's not viewed the same way from these people in the Arab countries. I'll stop at that.
What is preventing humanitarian aid from getting to the Gazans? Is Israel blocking it, or Hamas taking it, or no one sending it? What can be done to get the food and water to the Gazans?
Well, I can say a couple of things about that. The evidence is that Israel is not entirely blocking it, but substantially restricting the amount of aid that can get through, and has justified the restrictions by saying that it seems to be falling into the hands of Hamas. There's no evidence of that, and there's no reason really to give it much credibility. The real question is, how much political will is there to secure the delivery of the desperately needed medical supplies, food, fuel, and that could be a kind of ultimatum to Israel as a step that the governments that have been supportive of it should at least take a minimal step, the least they can do at this point.